Are you familiar with what's going on here at Baldur's Gate 3 and Larian Studios? Have you heard about the drama surrounding their success and how developers and other people are essentially hating on them and their success because they're scared and worried about what this means for the industry and what's expected of them moving forward? Ladies and gents, Casual Gaming Dad here, and last week I made a video about Baldur's Gate 3 talking about my experience so far with the game, having played a bit in early access and having purchased, obviously, the game, having been in early access and playing a bit more, and talking about some reasons why you should or should not play the game. Because I do believe that for very many people, it's definitely going to be an incredibly enjoyable and immersive experience. Whereas for others, it maybe less so, and it may just not be for you, and that's okay. But today I wanted to talk about a little bit about this drama, and I know lots of other content creators, and I've been watching videos of them talking about it. Talk about this drama that's been going on since last month when someone posted on Twitter. I don't remember the name of the person, and made some interesting points and whatnot, but about Baldur's Gate 3 and it kind of setting this precedent for people and thinking about what to expect of others moving forward from the development side. The problem is that those comments didn't really consider the consumer side, namely that from a consumer perspective, we're not going to be as familiar with how difficult or challenging it is to make a game. Most consumers who play these games are not. So the excuse that it's really difficult or it's time consuming or challenging to make things work on PC properly compared to console, those types of things, consumers aren't really going to care about that. They're not going to really be interested in that. They're not going to know. They're not going to understand. I'm not a developer myself, but I do have friends and family that are developers that work in this type of space, and so I have some insight because I'm able to ask them about. So if I wanted to do X, Y, or Z in a game, how difficult or challenging, or how might you go about doing that? Not everyone has that. So most people aren't going to understand that. But regardless, what are some things that we can learn about this situation, right? And I have to say that the CEO of Larian Studios, Sven, very humble, showed a lot of humility. He's addressed some of this discourse regarding people saying that, and he's very humbly said, well, we've had 20 years experience working on these types of games, and we have the knowledge and the resource to make a quality game. And while I do appreciate the point he's trying to make and his humility in this sense, right? I think it's pretty obvious that we have a very select group of people who are really passionate, who are very creative, who have just a really great group, who are just genuinely interested in making a really enjoyable and immersive experience for players. And I've been a fan of Larian since I played the Divinity games, especially Divinity Original Sin 2, and it just really sold me on this company. And I knew this was going to be a masterpiece. And I'm 20 hours in, and so far it has not disappointed me in the slightest. But at the same time, I think the problem is that developers often look at consumers as a number, right? Because they're often making these games more for the shareholder than they are for the consumer, right? And that's just the unfortunate reality of modern gaming. And something I was having this conversation with a family and with a sibling actually, and the way he phrased it was, when we buy a game, it's our vote of sorts, right? We're voting that. So if I buy a game, whether I play it or not, is irrelevant. I mean, I purchased the game. Companies are often going to look at that more closely than anything else. especially one that is publicly traded, like Activision Blizzard, for example. And so that's our vote to say, hey, we want more of this, right? So at the end of the day, the consumer has all the power, and people talk about boycotting games and whatnot. And while I think it's great in theory, and in smaller groups, maybe it makes sense. You usually have a vocal minority voicing out their opinions about these things, and you'll see them in the numbers in the thousands, right? On, excuse me, critic websites and whatnot, thumbing down games. But at the end of the day, the numbers speak for themselves, because if a company, I'm just going to use Activision Blizzard as an example, right, has sold millions of copies of Diablo 4, they're going to look more at that than anything else when determining whether they're having success or not. Now, I think that, sometimes we'll see devs and they'll stand out, individual ones here and there, that they still exemplify passion and what it looks like. Sven here in this video from, the last Hell panel they had, I think it was like 6 or 7 months ago, is clearly, a standout figure, him and his team. And I'm sure so many of the developers there. It just has to be. Otherwise, you wouldn't see such a quality game come out, And it's nice when we have that. And it's kind of sad that we don't so often. So for me personally, I am more selective about the games that I purchase, right? And it would be my wish for the gaming community for us to do the same, right? I know it's difficult. Sometimes you see your favorite content creator or you have your friends playing a game and you want to buy into it. And I'm very guilty of this, especially when I was in my 20s, which seems like a lifetime ago now. And I used to play a lot of games for that reason, not really because I enjoyed them that much. Maybe I did for a period, but after a bit, not so much. And now I've kind of come to my senses, especially as I've gotten older and my responsibilities and I have less time to play. I have to be a lot more selective about what I do with my time. So I would encourage the community as a whole to really learn from this type of, again, I'm going to use Larian as an example, from this type of situation where what should be happening is the community should be celebrating really this type of game that is feature complete. Feels like it's been 20 years since we've had games like that. No in-game transactions whatsoever. And has little to no bugs. Very, very, very little. There's only like 1 or 2 things that I noticed and they've been fixed, right? Or I was able to change a setting on my computer and fix that, One was audio, the other was the version number, which was showing here. They fixed that already on, I think it was the first day or the next day. And to have such expansive and creative talent behind this beautiful, fully voice acted, runs perfectly on PC game that gives you so much freedom and opportunity to do what you want to do, and just really rewards creativity and strategy, and has just these very thoughtful and deep storylines with characters. There's just really not much else like it. Now, that doesn't mean that this is the only type of game that I like. Definitely not, I wanted, like so many of the players, for Diablo 4 to be better than it is right now. And when it first came out and I was playing through the game, I really thought it was. Unfortunately, we found out the hard way as we got higher level that it wasn't. Thankfully, it was still fun for me to play. So I played it quite a bit. I played about 200 hours worth of the game. Most of that, almost all of that, was preseason. I did play some of the season, not much. I tried hardcore character and that was it. I leveled up to 50 and I stopped. So it's my hope that the game will be in a better state eventually, right? But again, I think there are some lessons for us to be learned about this. Again, we should be celebrating a studio like Larian that's not publicly traded, that's not owned by some really big, large company, that is obviously very passionate about their games, and that we can use that as a space for us to be, as a consumer, for us to be more selective with our choices, you know. And as the developer, my hope would be that they would be inspired to do so, and that companies would look more at how Larian has had success here. They're great success without any of that, you know, without any of the additional live service, without the battle passes, without a shop, anything of that sort, and able to have really great success, and that you can have that success. You don't need any of the extras, you know, that you can do well, that you don't need to be so incredibly greedy. It's just not necessary, right? And from the creator perspective, I think we can learn to be, because there's so much anger and hate and, you know, hate content, as many refer to it as, and you know, there's only a handful of creators that really don't buy into that, because it just gets views when you act like that. I think that I could, if I wanted to, if I had more time, I could build my channel up more if I just post. I see lots of smaller content creators doing that too. They want the views. If that's what you want, then that's fine. I respect that, but at the same time, you know, I wish there was more creators out there that could just approach these things more calmly, constructive criticism, and provide appropriate feedback without all of the anger and the hate and really spreading that negativity. I'm not a fan of that. I don't want to be a participant in that, and that's, if you do, that's fine, but I don't. And I really hope that this community can grow, and that we can be better than we were before games like this come on. Be better. Now we can see that there's still places, there's still developers out there like Larian. There still are people out there that are passionate and want to provide us these really incredibly immersive and wholesome gaming experiences. And you know, I don't need to have years like this where we just have an enormous amount of releases. I don't need to have this all the time. I can see myself going back and playing a game like Baldur's Gate 3 for years and years. Even recently, I had downloaded Neverwinter Nights, you know, the last big D&D game that I enjoyed personally, and you know, just go back and play it and just have fun still, you know. So it is what it is. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this situation. What do you think are some things we can learn from it? You know, because I'm just one perspective. I'd love to hear what you think, and you know, sound off in the comments. And I'd like to take a moment to ask you to, if you watch the video and if you like this kind of content and this approach, you know, leave a like and consider subscribing. You know, it would motivate me to make more content, of course. You know, I'm going to be trying to do a little bit more consistent, and I'd appreciate your feedback on that. So thanks so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.